5:47 a.m., March 14, 2026. A hunting cabin outside Polebridge, Montana. 12 miles from the Canadian border, 4 U.S. Marshals in tactical gear moved through knee-deep snow toward a single-story log structure. No lights inside. One vehicle parked under a tarp, a shotgun leaning against the front door frame. The target, a sitting federal bankruptcy judge from the Southern District of Florida, 41 days on the run, 3 prepaid phones, $180,000 in cash, and a fake Idaho driver's license in the name of David R. Lansing. His real name was Robert Howerin, and until 6 weeks earlier, he had controlled billions of dollars in bankruptcy proceedings from a courtroom in Fort Lauderdale. The U.S. Marshals Service had tracked him across 2,100 miles, through 7 states across dozens of dead-end leads. The Gulf Coast Regional Fugitive Task Force had been activated within hours of his disappearance. The FBI's Public Corruption Unit had been building the case against him for 3 years. $96 million in fraudulent asset transfers, 6 years of steering cases, a network of shell companies, rigged auctions, and kickbacks that reached into the courthouse itself. This is how it unraveled. Robert Howerin was appointed to the federal bankruptcy bench in the Southern District of Florida in October 2017. He came from a mid-sized commercial litigation firm in Boca Raton, where he had spent 14 years handling corporate restructurings and creditor disputes. His nomination drew no controversy. His Senate confirmation was routine. His early caseload was unremarkable. Bankruptcy courts process thousands of cases per year. Most involve individuals or small businesses, but a subset involves large commercial entities, companies with real estate portfolios, equipment fleets, intellectual property, and liquid assets worth tens of millions. These cases generate enormous fees for attorneys, trustees, and asset managers. And the bankruptcy judge controls nearly every material decision: who gets appointed, which bids get approved, and how assets are distributed. Howerin's docket in Fort Lauderdale included a steady flow of these high-value cases: real estate developers who over-leveraged during the post-COVID boom, hospitality chains that collapsed under debt, medical equipment companies that defaulted on supplier contracts. By early 2020, a pattern began to form. Not one that was visible from the outside. Not to the attorneys who appeared before him, not to the clerk's office that processed his orders, not to the 11th Circuit's periodic reviews. The pattern was in the outcomes, specifically in who was buying the assets. Bankruptcy asset sales follow a structured process. A trustee is appointed, assets are appraised, bids are solicited. The court approves the sale, typically to the highest qualified bidder. It is supposed to be transparent, competitive, arm's length. In Howerin's courtroom between January 2020 and November 2025, 31 high-value asset sales were approved. 23 of those sales, 74%, went to entities connected to the same network of buyers. Shell LLCs registered in Delaware, Wyoming, and Nevada. Different names, different registered agents, but the same beneficial owners. The companies had names designed to look institutional: Meridian Recovery Partners, Coastal Bridge Capital, Apex Asset Solutions. They filed clean paperwork, they posted escrow, they showed up at auction with certified funds. What they didn't do was pay fair market value. A medical equipment company in Pompano Beach was appraised at $14.2 million. Coastal Bridge Capital acquired it for $6.8 million. A chain of assisted living facilities in Broward County, appraised at $31 million, sold to Meridian Recovery Partners for $17.4 million. A commercial real estate portfolio in Miami-Dade, 11 properties, total assessed value $22.6 million, went to Apex Asset Solutions for $11.1 million. Across 31 transactions, the total appraised value was $196 million. The total sale price was $96 million less than that. The gap, $96 million, didn't disappear. It was redistributed. Portions flowed back through a chain of intermediaries. Consulting fees to firms that did no consulting. Management agreements with entities that managed nothing. Legal retainers to attorneys who never appeared in court. And at the end of every chain, cash. Cash that went to Howerin. The mechanism was built by 2 people. The first was Leonard Fisk, a Fort Lauderdale bankruptcy attorney who had practiced in the Southern District for over 20 years. Fisk had appeared before Howerin dozens of times. He represented debtors, creditors, and occasionally the trustees themselves. He knew every procedural lever in the system. The second was Angela Torres, a real estate appraiser licensed in Florida, who provided court-ordered appraisals in many of the cases Howerin oversaw. Torres's appraisals set the baseline expectations for asset values. If the appraisal was low, a below-market sale didn't raise flags. If the appraisal was accurate, a below-market bid would trigger questions. Torres learned to split the difference. Her appraisals weren't wildly inaccurate. That would draw scrutiny. They were systematically biased, 5 to 15% below true market value, depending on the asset type. Enough to create a cushion, enough to make a discounted bid look competitive. Fisk's role was structural. He drafted the sale motions, he selected the trustees or recommended them to Howerin, who rubber-stamped the selections. He ensured that competing bidders faced procedural obstacles, short notice periods, complex qualification requirements, last-minute amendments to sale terms. Legitimate buyers dropped out, the shell companies won. The third participant was someone inside the courthouse itself. Denise Carver had been a deputy clerk in the bankruptcy division of the Southern District since 2011. She processed case filings, managed docket entries, and handled sealed documents. She had access to everything that moved through Howerin's courtroom before it became public. Carver's role was information. She knew which cases were coming, which filings were sealed, and which orders were about to be entered. She passed this intelligence to Fisk, who used it to position the shell buyers before competing bidders even knew an opportunity existed. For 6 years, this system operated without triggering a single formal complaint. If you're watching this and finding it useful, hit the like button. It helps this kind of content reach more people. The first crack appeared in February 2025. It didn't come from a regulator, a competing bidder, or a whistleblower inside the network. It came from a data analyst at the U.S. Trustee's office in Atlanta. The U.S. Trustee Program is the Department of Justice component responsible for overseeing the integrity of the bankruptcy system. It monitors trustees, reviews fee applications, and flags irregularities. Most of its work is procedural, case-by-case reviews, fee audits, compliance checks. But in late 2024, the Atlanta office had begun running a new analytical tool across case data from all 11 federal judicial districts in the Southeast. The tool cross-referenced sale outcomes, final prices, buyer identities, appraisal-to-sale ratios, across thousands of cases. The Fort Lauderdale cluster lit up immediately. An analyst named Jason Webb pulled the data. 31 cases, 23 connected buyers. Average sale price, 51% of appraised value. The national average for bankruptcy asset sales in comparable case types was 78 to 84%. 51% was an anomaly, not a statistical outlier, a structural impossibility in a functioning competitive market. Webb wrote a referral memo. It went to the FBI's Public Corruption Unit in Miami on March 3, 2025. The FBI opened a preliminary investigation designated PC-2025-0447 on March 11, 2025. Supervisory Special Agent Christine Delgado was assigned as case agent. Her team began with financial records. The shell companies, Meridian, Coastal Bridge, Apex, and 9 others, were registered across 3 states. Delaware provided the corporate formation documents. Wyoming provided the registered agent records. Nevada provided nothing useful because Nevada's disclosure requirements for LLCs are minimal by design. But the bank accounts told a different story. Meridian Recovery Partners held accounts at 2 regional banks in South Florida. Between 2020 and 2025, those accounts received $67 million in incoming wire transfers. They disbursed $61 million. The disbursements went to 12 different entities, none of which had any employees, physical offices, or business activity visible to the public. Delgado's team traced the money through 4 layers. Wire transfers to management companies paying consulting fees to advisory firms issuing retainer payments to individual accounts withdrawing cash. At the end of 2 chains, separated by 3 intermediaries each, were accounts controlled by Leonard Fisk. At the end of a 3rd chain was an account in the name of a trust, the RLH Family Trust, whose sole beneficiary was Robert Howerin's wife. The total amount that reached Howerin-connected accounts over 6 years? $4.3 million. For Fisk, the total was higher, $7.1 million in traceable funds, plus an unknown amount in cash transactions that left no electronic trail. Angela Torres received $1.9 million through a single intermediary, consulting firm called Valiant Advisors, LLC, registered in her sister's name. Denise Carver received $340,000 in cash payments over 4 years, delivered in envelopes to a P.O. box in Davie, Florida. The FBI confirmed the payments through surveillance footage from the post office and from text messages recovered from Fisk's phone. By August 2025, the FBI had built a financial map of the entire network. But financial records alone wouldn't secure convictions against a sitting federal judge. They needed corroboration. In September 2025, Delgado's team made a decision that would define the investigation. They turned Leonard Fisk. The approach was direct. 2 agents visited Fisk at his office on September 8, 2025. They presented a summary of the financial evidence. They explained the charges he was facing: wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit honest services fraud, and RICO predicates that carried mandatory minimums. Fisk's attorney negotiated for 11 days. On September 19th, Fisk signed a cooperation agreement. He would wear a wire. He would record conversations with Howerin. He would testify before a grand jury. The first recorded conversation took place on September 24, 2025, at a restaurant in Boca Raton. Fisk and Howerin discussed an upcoming case, a construction materials company in bankruptcy with assets valued at $8.7 million. On the recording, Howerin referenced the usual arrangement and discussed which shell entity would submit the bid. He mentioned a specific percentage, 42 on the back end, which Delgado's team interpreted as the kickback rate on the spread between appraisal and sale price. 3 more recorded meetings followed over the next 6 weeks. Each one added specificity: names of cases, dollar amounts, references to Carver's role in providing advance notice of filings, references to Torres's appraisals being adjusted. On November 12, 2025, a federal grand jury in the Southern District of Florida returned a sealed indictment against Robert Howerin on 14 counts: 7 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, 2 counts of conspiracy, 1 count of honest services fraud, and 1 RICO count. The indictment was sealed for operational reasons. Howerin was still sitting on the bench. He was still hearing cases. The FBI wanted to arrest him in a controlled setting, at his home, early morning, minimal public disruption. The unsealing was scheduled for February 3, 2026. It never happened the way they planned. On the evening of February 2nd, Howerin left his home in Coral Springs, Florida, at approximately 8:15 p.m. His wife told agents later that he said he was going to his office at the courthouse to retrieve files. He never arrived. His personal cell phone was found on the kitchen counter. His government-issued laptop was on his desk at home. His car, a 2023 Lexus ES, was located the following morning in the long-term parking lot at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. No flight records matched his name or any known alias. The FBI and U.S. Marshals Service immediately recognized what had happened. Someone had tipped Howerin off about the sealed indictment. The investigation into the leak focused on a narrow universe of people who knew about the seal: the prosecutors, the case agents, the grand jurors, and the court personnel who processed the sealed filing. Within 72 hours, electronic surveillance identified the source. Denise Carver had accessed the sealed docket entry on January 29th, 5 days before the planned arrest. Phone records showed she contacted Hollerin's personal cell that same evening. The call lasted 4 minutes. Carver was arrested at her home on February 5th. She was charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy. She refused to cooperate. By that point, Howerin had a 3-day head start. The U.S. Marshals Service activated the Gulf Coast Regional Fugitive Task Force on February 3, 2026. Deputy U.S. Marshal Kevin Hargrove was designated lead on the fugitive case. His team began with what they knew. Howerin had left with no personal cell phone, but Hargrove's team obtained records from 3 prepaid phone numbers that had been purchased at a Walmart in Pembroke Pines on January 30th, the day after Carver accessed the sealed indictment. The phones were bought with cash. The buyer was captured on store surveillance. The footage was grainy, but facial recognition software returned a 91% match to Howerin. One of the 3 prepaid phones was activated on February 2nd at 9:47 p.m., 90 minutes after Howerin left his house. The activation pinged a cell tower in Pembroke Pines. A second ping registered at 11:14 p.m. from a tower near Florida's Turnpike north of West Palm Beach. Then silence. The phone was turned off or the battery was pulled. Hargrove's team issued a federal fugitive warrant and distributed Hollerin's photograph and vehicle description to every law enforcement agency along the I-95 and I-75 corridors. They also flagged his name, date of birth, and physical description with the National Crime Information Center, Customs and Border Protection, and the Transportation Security Administration. On February 5th, a gas station surveillance camera in Valdosta, Georgia, captured a man matching Hallerin's description, paying cash for fuel. He was driving a dark blue Nissan Altima, not his own vehicle. The plate came back to a rental company in Fort Lauderdale. The rental agreement was in the name of David R. Lansing, with an Idaho driver's license number that didn't exist in Idaho's DMV database. The rental had been booked on January 31st, about 2 days before the planned arrest. This meant Howerin had been planning his escape for at least 4 days before he ran. The Nissan Altima was flagged nationally, but Howerin was disciplined. He avoided toll roads where cameras would capture his plate automatically. He stayed off interstates where state police patrol density was highest. He paid cash for fuel. He didn't use credit cards, ATMs, or any electronic payment method. For 9 days, there were no confirmed sightings. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. On February 14th, a second prepaid phone, one of the 3 purchased at Walmart, was activated briefly near Memphis, Tennessee. The phone connected to a cell tower in Germantown, a suburb east of the city. The activation lasted 7 minutes. No calls were made. The marshals believed Howerin turned the phone on to check for voicemails or messages, then shut it down. 7 minutes was enough. The cell tower data gave Hargrove's team a direction: northwest. They widened the search corridor, Interstate 40 west through Arkansas, or Interstate 55 north through Missouri, or Highway 78 northwest toward Mississippi and Alabama. The options multiplied. Howerin could have been heading to the Canadian border, to the Pacific Northwest, or into the rural interior of the Mountain West. Hargrove made a judgment call. A man with $180,000 in cash and a fake ID wasn't heading to a city. Cities had cameras, cities had foot patrols, cities had people who might recognize a face from a news broadcast. Howerin was heading somewhere remote, somewhere cash-based, somewhere with seasonal population patterns that made a stranger less conspicuous. Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, the Dakotas, Eastern Oregon, rural Nevada. The search radius was enormous. Hargrove requested assistance from the Marshals Technical Operations Group, which specializes in electronic surveillance and tracking. They began monitoring the 3rd prepaid phone, the one that hadn't yet been activated. On February 19th, the Nissan Altima was found. A Billings, Montana police officer on routine patrol spotted the vehicle in a municipal parking lot near the Rimrock Mall. The car was locked, the keys were gone, the interior was clean. No personal items, no trash, no receipts. Howerin had wiped it down. Billings. That narrowed the search area significantly. Hargrove deployed 4 deputy marshals to Billings and requested support from the Montana Division of Criminal Investigation. They canvassed hotels, motels, and campgrounds within a 50-mile radius. They distributed Hoewerin's photograph to every gas station, general store, and outfitter in the region. No hits. Howerin had moved on from Billings, likely within hours of arriving. But moving on to where? Hargrove's team analyzed the geography. From Billings, the most logical routes to remote areas led in 3 directions: northwest toward Glacier National Park and the Canadian border, southwest toward Yellowstone and the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness, or northeast toward the Missouri Breaks, one of the most sparsely populated regions in the continental United States. Each direction offered isolation. Each had small communities where cash transactions were normal. Each had seasonal rental properties, hunting cabins, fishing lodges, summer homes that sat empty for months at a time. The marshals couldn't cover all 3 corridors simultaneously with the resources available. They needed a break. It came on March 1st, 2026. An outfitter in Columbia Falls, Montana, a small town near the western entrance to Glacier National Park, contacted the Flathead County Sheriff's Office. The outfitter, a man named Gene Kendrick, had rented a hunting cabin to a man calling himself David Lansing 3 weeks earlier. Cash payment. No questions asked. Kendrick rented cabins to hunters and fishermen regularly. Cash deals were common. He didn't run background checks. But on the evening of February 28th, Kendrick watched an episode of a network crime program that featured Hoewerin's case. The show displayed Hoewerin's photograph, his official court portrait, clean-shaven in a suit. Kendrick said the face was familiar, but not identical. The man who rented his cabin had a beard and wore glasses. But the bone structure was right, the build was right, and the timing was right. The man had shown up in late January or early February, paid 3 months' rent in advance, and asked almost no questions about the property. Kendrick called the sheriff's office the next morning. The sheriff's office called the U.S. Marshals. Hargrove's team arrived in Columbia Falls on March 3rd. They interviewed Kendrick extensively. The cabin was located outside Polbridge, Montana, an unincorporated community with no cell service, no paved roads, and a year-round population of fewer than 30 people. The nearest town with services was Columbia Falls, 35 miles south. Kendrick described the renter as quiet, polite, and private. He came to Columbia Falls approximately once a week to buy groceries and supplies at a small general store. He paid cash for everything. He drove a pickup truck. Kendrick didn't know the make or model, but described it as dark-colored, possibly black or dark green, older model. The marshals set up surveillance on the general store. On March 6th, a man matching Hallerin's description entered the store at approximately 2:30 p.m. He purchased canned food, batteries, bottled water, and a bag of charcoal. He paid with $100 bills. He drove a 1998 Ford F-150 with Montana plates. The plates were registered to a man in Kalispell who had reported the plates stolen 2 weeks earlier. The surveillance team followed the truck at a distance. It drove north on the North Fork Road toward Polbridge. After approximately 40 minutes, it turned onto a dirt road and disappeared into the trees. The team did not pursue. A vehicle following on a single-lane dirt road would be immediately conspicuous. But they had the location, and they had confirmation. Hargrove coordinated the tactical arrest plan over the next 8 days. The delay was intentional. The cabin was remote. The road in was a single lane with no cover. If Hallorin saw them coming, he could flee into the wilderness. And in early March, the backcountry around Glacier was buried in snow, making pursuit on foot extremely dangerous for both the fugitive and the arrest team. The marshals brought in the Special Operations Group in with the agency's tactical unit from Arlington, Virginia. 4 operators flew into Glacier Park International Airport on March 10th and drove to a staging area near Columbia Falls. The plan was a dawn approach. 4 marshals would move on foot from a staging point approximately 1 mile south of the cabin. 2 additional marshals would position a vehicle on the North Fork Road to block the only exit route. A Montana Highway Patrol helicopter would orbit at altitude, providing aerial surveillance and thermal imaging. The team rehearsed the approach twice on March 12th and 13th, using Kendrick's property maps and satellite imagery. They identified the cabin's layout: 1 main room, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and a front porch. 1 door, 4 windows. Kendrick confirmed that Hallorin, or Lansing as he knew him, owned at least 1 firearm. He had seen a shotgun in the man's truck. Kendrick also believed the man might have a handgun, based on the shape of a case he had carried into the cabin on one occasion. The arrest team treated the operation as a high-risk warrant service. March 14th, 2026. 4 a.m. temperature, 9 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 inches of fresh snow on the ground from an overnight storm. The 4-person team departed the staging area on foot at 4:15 a.m. They wore white camouflage over their tactical gear. Each carried a long gun, a sidearm, a ballistic shield, and night vision optics. The snow slowed their movement. They reached the tree line around the cabin at 5:20 a.m. The cabin was dark, no smoke from the chimney. The Ford F-150 was parked under a blue tarp beside the structure. A shotgun, a Remington 870, was leaning against the doorframe on the porch. At 5:47 a.m., the team leader announced over a bullhorn, "U.S. Marshals, federal warrant, come out with your hands visible." No response for 30 seconds. The announcement was repeated. A light turned on inside the cabin, movement behind the front window. The team held position, weapons trained on the door. At 5:49 a.m., the door opened. Robert Hallorin stepped onto the porch in jeans, a flannel shirt, and boots. His hands were raised. He was bearded. He wore glasses. He said one sentence, "I know why you're here." He was taken into custody without incident. The marshals secured the cabin and conducted a protective sweep. Inside, they found the Remington 870 shotgun, a Smith & Wesson .38 revolver, the 3 prepaid phones, $127,400 in cash in a duffel bag, the fake Idaho driver's license, and a laptop computer that was later found to contain encrypted files related to his financial accounts. The remaining $52,600 of the original $180,000 had been spent over 41 days. On the cabin rental, the truck, groceries, fuel, and supplies, approximately $1,280 per day. Hallorin was transported by vehicle to Glacier Park International Airport and flown by Marshal Service aircraft to Miami, where he made his initial appearance before a federal magistrate on March 16, 2026. He was denied bail. The magistrate cited the obvious flight risk the severity of the charges, and the fact that Howerin had already demonstrated his willingness and ability to flee. When they searched his Coral Springs home, agents found a second fake identity, a California driver's license in the name of Thomas Reardon, with a matching social security card. Both were high-quality forgeries. The source of the forged documents has not been identified. They also found a handwritten notebook containing account numbers for 2 offshore accounts, one in the Cayman Islands, one in Belize. The combined balance of those accounts as of March 2026 was approximately $2.8 million. The Department of Justice has filed forfeiture actions against both accounts. As of this recording, the Belizean account has been frozen. The Cayman Islands account remains in dispute. The case against the broader network moved quickly after Howerin's arrest. Angela Torres was arrested at her home in Plantation, Florida, on March 18, 2026. She was charged with wire fraud, conspiracy, and filing false appraisals. Her appraisal records were subpoenaed, and the FBI's forensic accountants documented systematic undervaluations across 23 cases. In 7 of those cases, Torres's appraisals were more than 20% below independent appraisals obtained by the prosecution. Torres retained a defense attorney but entered plea negotiations within 2 weeks. Her cooperation agreement, signed on April 1, 2026, requires her to testify against Howerin and Fisk at trial and to provide a full accounting of payments received through Valiant Advisors, LLC. Denise Carver, the deputy clerk who tipped off Howerin, remained in custody after her February arrest. Her attorney filed 3 motions to suppress evidence: the phone records, the sealed docket access logs, and the surveillance footage from the Davie post office. All 3 were denied. Fisk, who had been cooperating since September 2025, completed his grand jury testimony in January 2026. His cooperation agreement includes a recommendation for a reduced sentence, but the final terms will depend on the utility of his testimony at trial. A 5th defendant was added to the case on March 22, 2026. Gary Ridgemont, a Broward County real estate broker who had served as the beneficial owner of 3 of the shell companies. Ridgemont had no legal background. He was a property manager who had been recruited by Fisk in 2019 to serve as the front man for Meridian Recovery Partners, Coastal Bridge Capital, and a third entity called Trident Asset Group. Ridgemont received $890,000 over 6 years for his role. He is charged with conspiracy and money laundering. The total amount of money that moved through the network based on the FBI's financial analysis was approximately $196 million in asset transactions, of which $96 million represents the difference between appraised value and sale price. Of that $96 million, approximately $14.3 million has been traced to specific individuals: $4.3 million to Howerin, $7.1 million to Fisk, $1.9 million to Torres, and $890,000 to Ridgemont, plus $340,000 to Carver in cash. That leaves roughly $81.7 million unaccounted for. The FBI believes a significant portion of that money was absorbed by the shell companies themselves: operational costs, property taxes on acquired assets, renovation expenses, and resale commissions. But forensic accountants have been unable to verify the full disposition of funds. Some portion may remain hidden in accounts that haven't yet been identified. What do you think the sentence should be for a judge who corrupted the system he was sworn to protect? Drop your answer in the comments. The case raised a structural question about judicial oversight, specifically how a single bankruptcy judge could manipulate outcomes for 6 years without detection. The answer is in the architecture of the system. Bankruptcy judges in the federal system operate with enormous autonomy. Their decisions on asset sales, trustee appointments, and fee approvals are rarely appealed. The U.S. trustee program monitors broad compliance patterns but doesn't conduct case-level audits of individual judges. The 11th Circuit's judicial conduct reviews are complaint-driven, meaning they only activate when someone files a formal grievance. No one filed a grievance against Howerin in 6 years. The losing bidders assumed they had simply been outbid. The creditors received partial distributions and moved on. The trustees, several of whom were selected specifically because of their passivity, signed off on each sale. The only reason the scheme was detected at all was a new data analytics tool in the Atlanta U.S. Trustee's office, a tool that didn't exist before 2024. Without Jason Webb's statistical analysis, the Howerin network could have continued for years, maybe longer. The trial is scheduled for September 2026 in the Southern District of Florida. Howerin has pleaded not guilty to all 14 counts. His defense attorney has signaled that the strategy will focus on challenging the cooperating witnesses' credibility, particularly Fisk, whose own criminal exposure gives him a powerful motive to shade his testimony. Fisk is expected to be the government's star witness. His credibility will be tested extensively. The recorded conversations will be central to the prosecution's case, but defense attorneys have already filed motions challenging the authentication of 2 of the 4 recordings, arguing that the audio quality is insufficient for reliable transcription. Torres's cooperation is considered less critical, but adds corroboration to the appraisal manipulation element. Carver's refusal to cooperate means the prosecution will rely on documentary evidence, docket logs, phone records, and surveillance footage to establish her role in the tip-off. Ridgemont's attorney has indicated he may also seek a cooperation agreement, but as of early April 2026, no deal has been finalized. Howerin faces a maximum sentence of over 200 years if convicted on all counts. As a practical matter, federal sentencing guidelines would likely produce a range of 15 to 25 years, depending on the loss calculation and Howerin's role as the organizer of the scheme. The financial recovery effort is ongoing. The Department of Justice has filed civil forfeiture actions against 14 properties acquired through the shell companies, the 2 offshore accounts, and $3.2 million in domestic bank accounts linked to Fisk and Torres. Total recoverable assets identified so far, approximately $38 million. That's less than 40% of the $96 million gap. The network is dismantled. The shell companies are frozen. The judge is in a cell. But 41 days. That's how long a federal judge with $180,000 in cash and a fake ID ran from the United States Marshals Service. He made it 2,100 miles. He made it to a cabin 12 miles from the Canadian border. He almost made it out. Someone made his fake documents. That person hasn't been found. Roughly $58 million passed through this network and has not been recovered. The offshore accounts are being contested in foreign courts. The forfeiture process will take years. And the question that the case leaves behind isn't about Robert Howerin. It's about the system that allowed one judge with no meaningful oversight to control the fate of hundreds of millions of dollars in assets for 6 years. The new analytics tool caught this network, but the tool has only been deployed in 4 of 11 Southeast districts. The other 7 are still running blind.